So, viewer on YouTube, welcome to episode 50 of Connection Over Coffee. And I'm super chuffed to have Shannon Battisson, who is the National President of the Australian Institute of Architects. I just know that I'm going to trip over that so many times, like saying those words all in a row. There are lots of big words with distinct syllables that I will trip over. But Shannon, welcome. Before we press like a proper, record on this, just want to say thanks so much for being here. It's awesome to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I feel like it's a real honor to get to be included, and 50 sounds like a pretty good number. I like 50 as a number. Let's roll with it.
Oh, I know. It seems, after living in Asia for a long time, like I'm all about auspicious things. So yeah, 50 feels pretty auspicious.
Yeah,
so we'll go with that.
I'll take it.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, let's go with this. And right. All right, we're just going to have to roll with it, see how the sound goes. And we might just have to, come back and re-record just, so awesomeness can strike twice. No, we won't.
I'm always good on the first take. Second take, I'm a disaster. So get it first time.
I don't. Right. Pressure's on. Right. Shannon Battisson, welcome to Connection Over Coffee.
Thank you for having me. It's really lovely to be here.
I have to say, before we started recording, we were talking about how you and I had been chatting over Instagram for the last few months. And I just have to say, it's just so fantastic to have you here, because this is like the first time that we've actually spoken face to face.
It is, yeah. And it's funny, I think one of the things I love about Instagram is that I'm one of those people who's really terrible on the phone. Like I get real anxiety about actually having to make a phone call. So texting is my kind of forte. It's my happy place. And I love that Instagram, I've actually, managed to work up the courage to meet all sorts of different people, because the interface is slightly less kind of anxiety ridden for people like me who don't like the phone.
Yeah, and I agree. And one of the things that I also really like is the voice memo, because like sometimes I get some messages and I'm like, oh no, this thumbs are getting sore. I'm going to just pop in a voice memo. So it's great. Like it's that middle ground, and sometimes while making a phone call can provoke anxiety, receiving phone calls can also provoke anxiety. So this just seems like in an example of using social media for good, this feels like using social media for good.
It does, absolutely.
So Shannon, who are you? And how did you let's just jump straight on into the tough questions.
Of course.
But who are you? How did you get to be the national president of the Australian Institute of Architects? And moreover, how did you get to be you beyond the title?
Big question. Look, I'm a Canberra girl through and through. I was born in Sydney, but raised here in Canberra on beautiful Ngunnawal country. And I think that it actually played a really big part of me becoming an architect, because Canberra is an immensely rich architectural legacy. I have a really, really deep-seated love of all things brutalist in architecture. And when I go walk around now with my own family here, I realize that my local library growing up is this fantastic brutalist building. The campus where my mother went to uni while I was in primary school is a fantastic modernist campus. And so I kind of was surrounded by architecture my whole life without really noticing or realizing it. And nobody in my family has anything to do with architecture. And so it was very much a kind of left of field thing, I think, a real sign that my mum knows me as well as she does, because I took a few years off after school and was traveling a lot, and I'm a big photographer, which is part of what I love about Instagram, is that I get to kind of celebrate that side. And after a trip overseas to see my sister, my mum said to me, for goodness sake, I love your photos of buildings are great, but just once I'd like a photo of you and your sister. So maybe you should study architecture, and then maybe I'd get a photo of you and your sister in front of a building. And from the moment she said it, it just really fit, and it's been a big part of who I am. I've had breaks from architecture over the years. It's a really demanding, and it can be at times a really unforgiving career. And so I've had times where I have taken a break, but it's always drawn me back because it's a big part, I think, of who I am. I am a co-director of a firm here in Canberra called The Mill Architecture and Design. My business partner Sarah is an interior designer, and we have a really great team of architects and interior designers, and we work on projects around Australia. I am married and have 2 children, and I am very, very grateful to be a foster parent to one of my nieces who challenges and makes me see the world in a whole new way. And yeah, I'm somebody who I think my team would probably describe me as master of the overshare. I've never quite worked out where that line is and what I'm supposed to say and not say. And I find that part of, I think, how I've got to the position that I've got to with the Institute, for example, is that I'm really open about the struggles that I have, the things that I have difficulty with in my profession, the things that I really love, and the things that kind of just make me not be able to leave architecture behind. And I think that resonates with people, and that's really helped me rise up through the Institute and be the one sitting in the National President's Chair right now.
Yeah, I have to say, one of the things, what you're speaking about, the word that's coming to mind is authentic. Authenticity, and there's the various words that sort of come after authentic, authentic leadership, or living authentically, that comes before authentically. But one of the things we always need to remember is that we always find people who live authentically, people who are vulnerable. Perhaps, as your team might say, to the point of oversharing, it is always like we can never underestimate the courage that it takes to live life like that, however that life looks.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and this is completely unscripted, but I really wanted to emphasize this point, particularly when it comes to loneliness and feeling disconnected. And going to the first pillar of the 3 pillars of connection, which really are the foundation of all of my work here at the Loneliness Guy. And the first pillar is connection to self. And connection to self involves knowing who you are and then having the courage to be who you are. And even if that risks judgment, if that risks the occasional eye roll by people in the office and go, "Oh, Shannon, you're oversharing again." I
can't believe you said that out loud.
I know. but it is one of those things that like we find it inspiring. We find it inspiring, and particularly, if we all think about our workplaces and the bosses who we've worked for, or the people that we've worked with, or the people we've worked to, who at some point in our, whatever career it is, whatever job it is, whatever, wherever we've gone to school or university or whatever, like someone who's been real, like we connect with them, and they can be awesome and human.
Yeah.
And be awesomely human. But then when it comes to us doing it, like we love it when other people do it and we connect with them, but there's this real reluctance within ourselves to like go there. And we kind of can get lost in our own thoughts and like, oh my God, am I going to be oversharing? Is this appropriate or whatever? And then you just go, no, bugger it, I'm going to do it. And then that's when the connection happens.
I always laugh that people, I very regularly say, "Oh, I just think it was so brave of you to, really share that thing." And I think it wasn't brave. I just have no filter and instantly felt regret once it was out there, but it's out there. So you've just got to roll with it.
I often say to my clients, after one of the calls, like of the connection course that I run, One of the course is, we sit for 2 calls talking about loneliness. One is like, we're going to talk about your loneliness, and perhaps that's for the first time you've ever said those words aloud.
Yeah.
And then the second call is all about how, like, essentially the price that we've been paying physically, mentally, and emotionally for not owning and speaking about our loneliness. And it's not until, we own it, and then we can then move on towards getting the connection that we need. But generally in those first 2 calls, like, they end with me giving this advice. And we need to be aware of what, I love this, and Dr. Brené Brown is my intellectual crush.
Mine too.
Oh, and she talks about the vulnerability hangover.
Yes.
And it's real.
It is so real. Every time I share something really deeply personal with somebody, I kind of walk away and think, oh gosh, am I going to regret that? Is that somebody I can actually trust to hold on to, how important that piece of information about me is?
Yeah. But
yeah, it is. There's just such an intense vulnerability, I think, in sharing who you really are.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this is, kind of, viewer, listener. I sent Shannon yesterday, or earlier, like last week.
I don't know what day it is today, so we're good.
Me neither. Some point past tense. I said, oh, this is what, I'm thinking, like, general vibe of the thing. Let's have a chat around this. What do you think? And so this is now going a bit off topic, off piste. But one of the things there is that when we look at people who are, for any kind of objective measure, successful, we can forget that, they're human too. And indeed, for many of us, I actually really feel that the measure of success is like being awesome at what you do, as well as being awesome at who you are.
I think that's a very good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And I think we have to recognize that more in our leaders, that it isn't that they don't feel fear or nervousness about doing something, but they chose to do it anyway. I know I have massive social anxiety. And so part of what foolishly got me involved in the Institute was trying to overcome that fear. I needed a network. I didn't have a network of architects here in Canberra when I moved home. And the thought of going to an event by myself is literally my, worst nightmare. And so I put myself in a position where I would be forced to go, but in my head, I would have a network around me to kind of, I joined the sustainability committee. And so I'd go to events with the committee. And then here I am somehow having got myself into a position where I have to go into events utterly by myself, where I don't know a single face in the crowd. I have to wear the presidential chain, which is the biggest piece of bling you've ever seen in your life. And for somebody like me who, would prefer to be a bit quiet and recessive, it's crazy. And I have massive panic attacks before I have to do these things. And when I say to people, well, I'm a socially anxious person, and so I find that kind of situation difficult. They're like, no, you're not. You just walk straight in there and own it. And I'm like, you did not see the panic attack 3 seconds before I walked in, and I said to myself, you have got to do this. Just keep going. Just keep walking.
It is. And I guess there's a certain vulnerability, not only in like showing up physically, with the chains, which are very visible, and I really want to say audible as well. Like, it's I don't want to talk about the date, because that tends to date like the content, but it's close to Halloween. So I've just got like, these kind of, Halloween, like these ghost chains, like that sound going in my head. But it's one thing for like, you to be seen in your role. And in some of the work that I do on my other side, the Lonely Diplomat, it's exactly like that as well. For so many people who are diplomats, who have to walk into a room, sometimes with hundreds of people, and you are wearing, in my case, like, you're the Australian diplomat, and everything that you say has the weight of the Australian government, whether you agree with it or not.
Yep.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
And there's some people in the room who want to trip you up, who are actively out there,
waiting for you to fall,
and are sitting there, with pens poised, and like, Phil from the Australian government said that this is stupid. No, that was Phil, like his personal opinion, like leached out there. But we can get lost in that role. We can get like, overwhelmed and hide within that role. And, the psyching ourselves up to be seen can actually be, of course, you can do it to get through it for a moment. And, for a dinner, for an event, for whatever it is. But, I've seen it. I've done it myself, lost myself in the ability to like walk into a room and go, blah, here's something about like, I don't know, like a managed migration policy that I think you really need to do because we do it and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Insert smarter words there. However, like, when we do get lost in that role, that can be really troublesome for us.
Yeah, I think I find where that gets harder is then in a personal setting, where you've been in a very public setting and for me a lot in media and things like that, taking a particular stand, which is the institute stand, and that's my role. And obviously I get to have input into that stand, but it's a big organization. It represents 13,000 people, and therefore it's not purely my voice, it's our organization's voice. And then, you can be over family dinner and somebody, you love can say, yeah, but that's not the truth. This, we've talked about this, or that's not how you do it at your house. This is the right way to do it. And, there's that kind of moment of friction where you realize, or you have to kind of realize, who are you in this moment? Wait, am I Shannon or am I the national president? And it takes a level of energy too, I think, to kind of keep those two people alive and going.
Yes.
And I certainly don't want to live without who I am, honestly. But yeah, it does. I think it's an interesting balance and very easy to lose, one or the other.
It is a constant balance, I feel. And oftentimes it's like, when we talk like work-life balance and things, it's like, okay, whose turn is it to disappoint next? So, and far too often, and, this is me speaking very personally here, like far too often, so many decision points in my life have been me going, oh no, like what I think or what I feel doesn't matter. Like doing what I'm expected to do, saying what I'm expected to say, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That is the thing that, really, fed my loneliness. Constantly putting me and, my words, thoughts, and actions secondary consideration to a role.
Yeah. Or conversely, like for me, I've been finding of late, I have a year in this role. It's a 3-year kind of term where you have a year as president-elect, a year as president, and then a year as past president. But there's a year where you're kind of really in the hot seat, and that's a conversation my family had. Can we cope with a year where I do a lot of travel, where my time is not necessarily my own? It's a conversation I had with my family and my team at the office. And yet, even though I know that I have the love and support of my family and my team, it's really lonely, especially as a woman and as a mother, to step away from family and to be okay with it, because a lot of people aren't okay seeing women put their career ahead of, or what they perceive as ahead of their family,
Yeah.
And so that kind of question constantly comes up. Or, you've got young children, how are they? Where are they? With their parent, the other one who loves them just as much, and that's something that I think I have been surprised, I think, how this year I've felt quite an intense loneliness in putting myself forward or allowing my career to kind of come first, where traditionally, you know, my husband's career has been the easier one to put forward. It earns us more money. It keeps us kind of more stable, and, you know, it allows us a lot of things. And I've felt, yeah, a real kind of being out there on my own when it comes to actually standing up and saying, no, I'm putting my career first this year. This is my year to do that.
Again, like it comes up, the word vulnerability comes up for me in that. And it is really easy. It is really easy when we're putting ourselves out there in whatever capacity, like personal capacity, professional capacity, personal professional capacity, like in a life capacity. It can be really easy to balk at the first hurdle, which is, what will people think?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really keen to explore with you, Shannon, is not only, like, you know, the courage that it takes to keep on showing up in the world as you, as, you know, beautifully flawed human you. Like that's the good stuff. Like being human, that's like, I'm here for that, and I can talk about that for days. But I guess in your like professional capacity as an architect, you're not only, you know, showing up in you know, meetings at work as you, but also like something that has come from you gets judged. And not only, you know, just when it's a, you know, I know that very little is done on paper anymore. But, you know, I you know, go with me. I've got, like, you know, these big rolls of paper in my mind, and you know,
I'm still a paper girl, so you're okay. I can't live without pens and paper.
But Jeff would be like, when he listens to this, he'll be like, sort of going, no, it's all iPad. But also, you know, and listener, viewer, if you don't know an architect in your life, just collect one, like make it a mission, collect one, have one in your life, and just see them, like, the way that they could just sketch. It's amazing. It really, like, I'm still at stick figures and stuff, but it's amazing watching how their brains work. However, not only, you know, is your work being assessed, judged, critiqued, and it may have come from, you know, deep within you, like these ideas. It's not only being judged at the paper stage, but, you know, once the building has been built for 50 years, for a very long time after that. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. Look, I still find one of the most nerve-wracking moments is showing a client a concept design. So, you know, it's an intense, anything creative, really, it's an intensely personal kind of journey. And so to then put it out on a, you know, meeting room table and show clients that moment where, you know, you see whether they've engaged or whether they haven't is terrifying. And it doesn't matter how long I've been doing it, I still find that. But, you know, some of the best architects in the world, Australian architects, I've heard Glenn Murcutt, you know, one of the most famous architects in Australia, say that without that nervousness, that fear, you've lost it. You've lost the kind of spark and that drives really wonderful, wonderful outcomes. But I think, you know, I think of every building that we either build or renovate in some way as this legacy. It's a legacy we're leaving for generations to come. And as somebody who specializes in climate responsive architecture, I'm so deeply buried in the you know, trauma of what we've done to our planet and how we come back from it. And I actually wish more people would think of the work that they do as a legacy. I wish that everybody who built any form of building looked at every part of it as a legacy they were leaving for generations to come, and maybe we'd do them a bit better. Maybe we'd think they're worth more than just a little bit of money. You know, like there's a kind of mentality, I think, at the moment about a lot of different buildings, be they our homes or commercial buildings. Public architecture is somewhat different, but not entirely, that they're a financial investment, first and foremost. And so it's about doing things for the most economic way or the fastest way. And there's lots of reasons behind that, and they're not totally invalid. But I think that our buildings stand for so much more. And I think that they deserve so much more of our thought before we build them. And for me, that kind of boils down to recognizing the legacy that we are leaving. So my particular type of architecture is highly bespoke, climate responsive architecture, which shouldn't be a specialty, but unfortunately it is. And so when I look at a house, I think I want the people who live in it to really love living in it. And years down the track, when multiple families have lived in that house, I want them to find joy in living in it and find that it supports the way their family comes together and gives them a big warm hug when they come home at the end of the day, or that kind of thing. And I think that the value in seeing that long term and the long legacy that you're leaving is what makes the sacrifice of the time to get a design right before you start building, and the investment in somebody's thought process or creative process worth spending, and minuscule compared to the decades and decades that building should stand for.
Yeah. I'm here for this conversation. I love this. What it feels to me that you're saying, Shannon, is, in terms of that, like really building a legacy is almost connecting to future generations.
Absolutely.
And, the antidote to loneliness is connection.
Yes.
And so I just think this is like, just beautifully almost poetic. In that whole, I'm building for today, but also for tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow.
Well, if you think about it, like I do a lot of talking, public speaking about our homes and how sacred they are.
Yeah.
And I'm trying, I guess, to counter the current mentality that our homes' biggest kind of reason to be is actually to help us provide financial growth for our families, right? And as I said, that there's validity to that, but actually our homes, their sole purpose is actually to provide shelter. And we're the only animal in the kingdom that doesn't hide their homes, that we don't provide shelter that is kind of hidden and safe and removed. Our homes are getting bigger and more, garish by the second. But if you break it down to what a home is supposed to be, in my living memory and that of my family, our homes are where we bring our babies home from the hospital. They're where we go to when we're grieving, when we're sick and we need to recover. They're where we welcome our friends and family to celebrate good things or gather when we're trying to come to terms with bad things. They're where we, sleep at night and where we raise families, no matter what that family looks like. And so if you break it down to that, how much of that is going to change in future generations? Won't our homes always need to provide those, really basic functions, really, if you call, raising a family a function? But that, when you project forward, isn't going to change. Maybe how we get around might change. Maybe the technology that we interact with won't change, but we will always need a place to come home to at the end of a day that feels safe and secure and that you can lay your head. And we will always need a place to be able to, bring children home from the hospital or to retreat to when we're sick, or, those things are not going away. They're part of who we are as a species. And therefore, investing in getting them right now in a space is only going to be a gift that keeps on giving, down the line. And I really feel for people who either don't have a house that was kind of thought of in that way of a home as a home first, or who don't have a safe place to live, who live rough and who don't have a regular place that they can make their own and that they can feel is intimately theirs, where they can be who they are. I think one of the best things about homes is that that's got to be the one space in the world where you can be who you are no matter what. You know, it's your safe place. And as much as my children, you know, probably wish I was less who I am at home, you know, like I kind of, you know, I get home at the end of the day and I kick off my shoes and I take off my watch and I get into some form of tracksuit pant or pajama, and then I feel like I can be me now. You know, my hair gets ridiculously curly and I stop caring if I've got curls that are sticking straight up. I stop caring if I've got makeup on, or, you know, if I'm ready for the world and I can just be me. And I just think that that's my biggest kind of, you know, love of what home is. And I wish that everybody truly got that feeling from their home.
This, that place where we're allowed to be who we are. And for anyone, any human, but, you know, particularly for gay men, that is, it's hard to overstate the importance of that. And I just want to invite the viewer, the listener, to really reflect on whether their home is somewhere that they can allow themselves to be who they are. Because if it's not home, if that place where if you can't be who you are at home, where can you be who you are? You know, is that a place outside of the home? Is that, you know, an exclusive gay space? You know, is that a bar, a club, you know, wherever? You know, is that outside? Is it inside? Is it, you know, wherever it is? But I think we all need to have somewhere where we feel that, you know, we're not under threat. Going back to that almost primitive, you know, reflection that you shared there, Shannon, on, you know, the purpose of a house or you know, a home, like a place to live.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, if you know, we work in a cubicle farm, and you know, can hear the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the clacking of a keyboard, you know, 50 meters away and stuff, like, you know, is you know, are we spending time where we're allowed to, you know, kick off our shoes and get into our jammies and, you know, just sort of lounge around and be who we are? What's the price that you think that we pay for not having those spaces?
Too high a price, if you ask me. It's I don't think there's, I don't know, a price that would make that worth it for me. And I get that I say that from a place of, you know, a very different setting. I remember, I'll never forget meeting, I spent a lot of time in Palm Springs in California, which I love because it's an absolute mecca of modernist architecture and I'm a diehard modernist. But I also love that it's a place where, for lots of different reasons, it's become a place that's really synonymous with open sexuality, I think, and people are allowed to be who they are. And even as, you know, slightly ambiguous, but essentially straight woman, I feel a freedom there to be whoever I am. And I can appreciate that for people who come to that place for other reasons. But I went during Modernism Week a few years ago and just met the most remarkable people from all different walks of life. But I met this one particular couple, two men who they live, you know, in a very traditional conservative community outside of Palm Springs, and they have a house. They're lucky enough to be able to have two homes, and one of them is in Palm Springs. And they invited me over for breakfast one morning, and they couldn't wait to show me their house. And we got in there, and they're both wearing incredibly flamboyant clothes and just so absolute. There was nothing about this house that wasn't lush and them. Yeah. And their wardrobe was just a sea of color and personality and character. And I said, wow, you've got two whole wardrobes. And one of them said to me, well, we could never wear this at home. So this is our place to come, where we don't have to tone down who we are. We can be whatever we want to be here. And it just made me realize that there are lots of people who live a life where they have to tone themselves down or take on, I guess, a role that isn't innately who they feel that they are. And that's I feel a real sadness about that as a society, we haven't yet got to a point where people can just be them, no matter what community you live in. I was very grateful for them that they had that opportunity to create a space where they just felt infinitely free. I was a bit envious, to be honest. I was like, that's all, I want this wardrobe. They're going to fall. Can I be your daughter? Can I come here?
And I feel, Shannon, that there are people all around the world who are nodding right now at listening to that, and they're either nodding and going, yeah, I wish I had that space, or nodding and going, thank God I have that space.
Yeah.
Even if it is, a tiny studio apartment, in the inner city of some kind of, major gay metropolis.
Yeah.
In somewhere in London or New York or San Francisco or somewhere like that, or Palm Springs, in a lovely modernist house. And yeah, I'm with you. I love Palm Springs. That's I don't think I've ever been hotter. And growing up in the Riverina, as I did, like, I like the heat, but Palm Springs took it to the next level, and I fear that my children melted a bit. When we were there in July a few years ago. But it is one of those places where there is a certain energy in spaces where people get together and where there's the allowance of people to be. And I'm trying to phrase this as a question, because I really want your thoughts on this, but I can't phrase it yet as a question, so I'm just going to say it. It really makes me sad that the allowance of people to be comes all too frequently as a secondary or even a tertiary or even more distant consideration over finance and money.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is an absolute tragedy, because, sure, it might be economically efficient, but it comes at a real human cost.
Yeah. I think as a society, and, different cultures would have, I think, different degrees of this, but I think as a society, we've come to a place, or we put ourselves in a place where all too often a financial cost is considered greater than a human cost. And I think that's a desperate sadness. I think that, I look at the way we develop cities, and I think so much of the civic spaces are designed primarily, I guess, about how to generate income for a city or generate income for businesses around, and less about the lesser consideration is, how do we build community? How do we design a space where people want to come on a Sunday and gather? And, it's one of those things that I think we overestimate how much it's going to cost to build something well that supports life and things like that. My sister lived in Hong Kong for many, many, many years. And one of the things that I'm always astounded about when we're there is when you go out on a Sunday and all of the predominantly women who come to Hong Kong to help in families as helpers, they're commonly known. My sister would slap my wrist for not currently being able to think of the better term for that. But they line the streets and they line the walkways, and they bring their little kind of almost like camping stoves, and they make food, and they spend all day together as a community on the one day that they're given outside of their work environment, really. And so they didn't need a really super duper special park and things like that, but they needed space. They needed that space to be there for them. And I think when I look at developments we're doing around our cities, particularly in Australia, but I see it when I travel a lot to look at architecture, to experience architecture. So I do see it elsewhere. We're kind of so busy thinking about the cost of our built environment that we really very easily forget, A, the cost of getting our built environment wrong, but also the inherent benefit of the space in between our built environment and what that can do to either build up and support community or to keep people separate and not encourage people to gather and to be vocal and be seen and be heard. You know, I come from a long line of activist family. My parents are both incredible activists, and we lost my father some time ago, but my mother, it's, you know, like I love that I can see her multiple times on a weekend and she'll have a different activist t-shirt, protest t-shirt on, whether we're saving the refugees in the morning and fighting for climate change action in the afternoon or whatever. And I think that having been raised in a family where we did protest, we let our voice be heard and things like that, I'm always really quick to notice, you know, when you move around newer developments, when people have actively put things in place so that large groups can't gather.
Yes.
Or, you know, I always think it's so mean-spirited, and I get it, but when, you know, you walk through a beautiful public space and people have put those little metal things along a seat so skateboarders can't, heaven forbid, get their skateboard, you know, up on it and things like that. And I always think, how mean-spirited. Wouldn't you like, I mean, so the Institute of Architects here in Canberra has a truly spectacular modernist building. It is utterly, utterly gorgeous. And if you haven't seen it, Google it or go past. But it's got these incredible earth berm walls that come up to it, and then this fantastic steep roof pitch they're designed to be exactly the same. Yeah. And I got a phone call a while back from one of our staff at the Institute who was horrified that she'd heard a funny noise and she'd gone out and there were BMX riders riding down the roof and bridging the gap onto the rest of the hill. And I just thought, wow, I mean, there is a use for that building form that I had never considered, and I love this building more than life itself. But I just think there's a real joy in that people will use a space in a way that even if you put these impediments in, people will find a way. But what a joy it would be if, as society, we built spaces that actually kind of fostered that coming together and being inventive with how you use a space, or being imaginative. And yeah.
I love that. I love that. And there's so much that's coming up for me right now, Shannon. And one is, you know, government, you know, working on loneliness, it's very clear that finance speaks to government. Like economic considerations speak to government, and some of the things that's happening here in Australia that I'm involved with, you know, on the margins, but it's all about putting an economic cost to loneliness. Because if you put a big enough number in front of government goes, oh shit, like we've got to do something about this, because, you know, it actually affects the economic, like the economics of, you know, I was going to say society. But no, it's the economy. Yeah. And I'm sure, like, you know, here in Australia, it's no different to, you know, everywhere around the world. But there's a growing amount of research that I'm really excited to keep learning about. And there's people like Hasley Killam in the United States, from the social health labs, and Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstad from Brigham Young in Utah, talking about the importance of social health. And social health is actually a much larger determinant of overall human well-being than, you know, anything else. Yeah. You know, you can take all your vitamins, you can take your medicine when you're sick, you can, you know, get all the sleep and eat all the right foods and work out and have healthy relationship to alcohol and not smoke and all of that kind of stuff. But it almost barely touches the side of, compared to the benefits that you get from having, like, feeling socially connected, again, to yourself, to those most important to you, and to your communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be, I think this is, we talked a little bit about balance before. I feel that there's a balance sort of shifting, because Castley and Dr. Holt-Lunstad, they're smart people. And they're putting together, like, the economic costs, and that's what we'll talk.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you said something about the space. We look at sort of urban design as buildings and series of buildings and things, but there was something that you said that made me think of that expression: music is the space between the notes.
Yeah.
And going to adapt that. It's like connection is the space between the buildings.
Yeah, well, it is. It's the space. And I'm literally just spent the last 2 days writing an article that I'm always late for, and I am currently late for. But in it, it's to accompany a magazine issue about civic spaces. So those spaces that we come together in. And I, in it, have been thinking about how our civic buildings are kind of like our public living rooms. They're the rooms we come together as a community. So you think of art galleries or shopping centres, which are generally not very architectural at all. But, you think of those buildings that are owned by all of us. They're where we come together and to live. So they're like our public living room, our community living room. And for me, the thought that's been really kind of bouncing around my head for the last couple of days while I try to write this article is that the space left between them isn't that our public backyard. This is where we go out to play. This is where we go out to have a picnic with our friends, or to have a birthday party and things like that. And we all know all backyards aren't created equal. I live in a new development. I had to work really hard to have a nice backyard that I can actually have trees growing and things like that. People who live in apartments, if a balcony is all you've got as your backyard, then you have to work really hard. But it's those spaces that we come together that become our collective backyard. I should write that down before I forget the article. But
it's lucky I've recorded this.
Yeah, that's lucky. I might have to come back to you and say, what was that word I used? And I think that's one of those things that COVID has really taught us, is that those spaces that we come together are really, really important. And I think they are the spaces in between. So if you, for example, live in an apartment complex and you've got a balcony and that's kind of your space, but most apartment complexes these days have communal facilities, shared barbecue facilities, a swimming pool and things like that. Now, the benefit of those spaces being not hard concrete, a pool, a barbecue, and nothing else, versus heavily planted space where you might have a smaller pool, but you've got beautiful shade structures and you've got fruit trees growing and you've got, tables and chairs that are out there so that people are encouraged to come together. The difference in those spaces and how people will actually use them, and if people will want to use them, is so different. And I appreciate that there's a financial cost involved in that. But the cost of not doing that, the cost of not getting that right, is far too great a cost. It's just too much. And it's a cost that we're saying the financial cost outweighs the human cost of not doing this properly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, it sounds trite, but, it's almost the stitch in time saves 9 kind of thing. And taking time and effort and investing in that legacy, investing in the future of, future generations. Yeah. Maybe even just one future generation, but, knowing that humans are going to be, and not only humans, but animals, and, are going to be inhabiting that space as well. Yeah. One thing, I'm just really mindful of the time, and I can, ask like thousands of questions and we can natter all day, I'm sure. But what's your advice for the listener, the viewer, who might be looking around where they're listening to this right now, I like to imagine that, you know, I'm speaking directly into someone's ears while they're wearing headphones, and, you know, maybe commuting, or, you know, cleaning their apartment, their house, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What if they're not like sitting down and enjoying the coffees either, you know, because that's what you're meant to be doing, listener and viewer. But one thing, like, what's your advice when someone's like their environment is not sustaining them, doesn't facilitate connection? Like, is there like something that you could suggest that they could do, could alter, that might really support them?
Yeah. Look, I think our built environment, in the exact same way that the natural environment can, it's a really visceral experience for most of us. You know, like I can literally feel the same feeling of, you know, quickened heart rate and my breath catching in my throat when I think back about the first time I experienced, you know, a really, you know, some of my favorite spaces, standing at the entry to the Salk Institute in La Jolla in San Diego, and feeling, you know, the hairs stand up on my arms, and, you know, that kind of intense physical joy, really, from a really beautiful kind of piece of built environment, the same way that you get if you're sitting in a forest and it's quiet and you can hear a creek trickling somewhere. You know, there's some really powerful experiences that we get. I think that for me, it's about creating a kind of warmth, I guess, in the environment that we've got. So I know that that's, you know, we don't all live in, we're not all lucky enough to live in houses that were either designed for us or that we own and can alter and things like that. And so I like to look at the things that make me happy. What are the things that kind of give me that same kind of joy, and try and put those into the space. So, for example, you know, when I was renting a room in a house when I was at uni and I was going through a really difficult period, my father was dying. I felt very disconnected now that you know, I think about it. I didn't really feel connected with the rest of my uni students because they were all living this fantastic, you know, drunken adventure of a life and things like that. And I was splitting my time between a hospital and uni and trying to work enough to be able to pay my rent and things like that. And so I lived in a share house, and I didn't like the people that I lived with. They didn't feel like home to me at all, but I had my room. And so that I know that the things that make me feel happy and safe and kind of like I can have that moment at the end of the day that I get back and I relax into are things like light, are things absolutely fresh air. So opening a window, even, you know, if you know, the temperature inside is perfectly lovely already because you live in a conditioned environment, open a window. There is nothing better than fresh air. I don't care what temperature that air is. And I say that having, you know, lived most of my life in Canberra, but having lived in the Swiss Alps or spent time in Palm Springs in the middle of July, or Peshawar in northern Pakistan at the same time, which was equally horrifyingly hot, and then nature and views. And so I know that when I'm trying to make a space feel supportive and warm and things like that, I put up pictures of people that I love and who I know love me with all of my quirks and faults. I put up photos of, you know, I blue tack things to the walls. I put up photos of places that make me feel really lovely when I go there, so that if I'm having a rough day, I can look at that photo and remember for a moment what it felt like to stand in the Salk Institute and feel those, you know, incredible walls around me. I put up photos of nature. I have an obsession with indoor plants that, well, I'm in my office right now and I can see about 40, and my house sadly is no different. So indoor plants are something that I really love because you nurture them. You have to nurture them, and they give back to you, you know, when you nurture them. And so that kind of connection to the environment and things like that really, I think, warms a space and makes you feel connected. And I use lamps. I really like lamps. So, you know, there's kind of that, like you said before, the flickering of a fluorescent light overhead isn't nice. I suffer from really severe chronic migraine, and there is nothing worse for me than a screen and bright lights when I'm not feeling well. And
Yes.
so I love a desk lamp or a floor lamp. I love to be able to adjust, you know, the lighting in a space. And so, you know, find a really nice lamp on Gumtree or at, you know, the Green Shed. I don't know what the Green Shed is called in other places, but in Canberra, it's the Green Shed, where you can go and buy for, you know, a couple of dollars things that somebody else doesn't need, so that you can have a nice softer light, you know, and that kind of softer environment. I always think it's crazy when you go into houses and there's so much light and that's your only option. It's dark at night or it is, you know, beyond daylight. And so being able to have light that's softer and warmer and things like that it's really important. So those are my things I think that I do to a space when I'm trying to feel at home. I love really cheesy movie. I love cheesy movies, but I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's like Under the Tuscan Sun or something. And she moves into this old Tuscan villa. And she says in this line, you know, about how she's moving through the house slowly, getting to know it and introducing herself to the house one room at a time. And I think there's real power in that you don't have to be able to change your whole environment. But if you can make one space feel more like you, feel like that's your space, that you can be whoever you are and celebrate that, then, you know, wouldn't your life be nicer for it?
I just love that. I feel like, you know, this I was going to say intense sense of calm, but I think that's kind of like intense calm feels like a bit of an oxymoron there. But it is, yeah, like, you know, just that it sounds really simple. It sounds really, really, really simple, but, you know, carving out a space that is uniquely yours in however that space is, in, you know, whatever means that we have where we are in the world to go and do that. And as simple as, you know, simple and as obvious as putting up, you know, a picture or you know, I feel that, you know, that the listener and the viewer are probably like, yep, with you on the pot plants, on the house plants. Then yeah, like as you know, we are in our house as well, and I'm constantly having to like swat away
the gnats away. Yeah, we've got a real gnat problem at the moment too, don't we?
Like
all the
downside. But yeah, I think fantastic sort of advice and very sort of eminently practical. Shannon, as we wrap up, where can people find you?
Well, look, everywhere on social media. No.
Taking great photos.
Yeah. Look, on social media, Instagram is my chosen kind of place to share my love of all things kind of built environment and the people. I love to share the love of people that I've met through social media. So my handle is It's an Architect Thing, because lots of people I think don't quite get, lots of people in my family I think don't quite get my love of buildings. And so I'm always saying, well, maybe it's an architect thing, you know, like maybe the fact that I just cried because I experienced this particular building, and all my children are always saying, stop touching the walls, Mum. Like, it's creepy the way you do that. And I'm like, but look at that stone. Like, isn't that the most amazing piece of concrete you've ever seen? So, or if you're in Canberra, my company is The Mill Design. We're in Deakin. We're in a beautiful little spot down here. Reach out if, you know, you can, if you need some help creating a space that's just you, and yeah, say hello. I love meeting new people.
Love it. I have to say, listener, viewer, on Instagram, you know, it's an architect thing. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. And yeah, like I admit that, you know, sometimes there's like, you know, in our house, there's like architecture porn. And yeah, I find, you know, like this whole, like, you know, seeing it, like I feel very calm. And, you know, and it's great to have someone like Jeff in my life. And I'm like, yeah, I like that. You know, and he's like, well, you like that because of, you know, like the textures, and this is what, like, where your eye goes to. And I'm just constantly learning. I'm always curious. It's fantastic. But Shannon, I want to say most profoundly, thank you so much for being here, for your time, but most importantly, for you being here. This conversation sort of went to a couple of different directions that I feel you might actually experience a vulnerability hangover after this.
guaranteed. I'm not going to lie, but that's okay. I'm fairly used to that experience. But no, look, I thank you for having me. I think conversations like these are what's helped me when I'm having moments of real difficulty and pain in my life. And I think that anytime we can do something that puts something out into the world that might be that point that helps somebody else is a really wonderful thing to do. So thank you for having me be part of your work. I think it's very important. And I hope that, you know, we're moving towards a world where people feel they can be who they are, truly who they are, everywhere, and they don't need just one space where it's safe.
Yeah, and hopefully that space where it's safe is more than a closet,
Exactly.
which, you know, literally and figuratively. And yeah, I just so profoundly grateful. And I feel, you know, if we're going to sort of summarize this word, it's legacy. Like, not only do you create a legacy through your work, but you create a legacy by being you. And that's simply beautiful to be a part of. It's a beautiful thing to witness. And I'm so here for it. I'm getting popcorn. I'm like, I know, like, I find that shit so inspiring, no matter who they are and how they're being. But please keep on being you in the world, because that's what we really need.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Phil.
All right.